Rungiri High Court, and Budaka and the Patongo Magistrates Courts, 5 new High Courts, court circuits in Wakiso, Entebbe, Kumi, Rugazi, Patongo, and 10 magistrates courts were operationalized, bringing the total to 268 courts countrywide. Construction is ongoing of regional appeal courts in Gulu and Mbarara, Soroti and Tororo High Courts, and Karenga Magistrate Court. This will further reduce travel distances for justice. 3. There is increased use of technology in delivery of justice. The electronic court case management system is now operational in 20 courts, boosting filing rates by 20.6%. Additionally, 20 courts have video conferencing systems enabling online case handling, which has improved efficiency. Madam Speaker, I have provided 602.7 billion shillings next financial year under the Administration of Justice program for strengthening alternative dispute resolution, increasing the use of technology in justice delivery, building more courts to improve access to justice, and increasing the civil jurisdiction of magistrates courts. Legislation and oversight. Madam Speaker, the legislature has registered several achievements during financial 24-25. Parliament held 73 sittings and passed 35 bills, concluded 3 petitions, passed 45 resolutions, adopted 53 reports. Most importantly, the turnaround time for enactment of legislation has reduced significantly. I commend you, Right Honorable Speaker, for this tremendous achievement. Madam Speaker, I have provided a total of 1.03 trillion next financial year for legislative processes, public engagements, and outreach, providing parliamentary oversight of democracy and governance, and ensuring accountability for public funds and implementation of public programs. Management of natural disaster. Madam Speaker, to protect Ugandans from disaster, this financial year, government invested 200.3 billion in early warning systems, mitigation interventions, and the provision of relief items to affected households and communities in the disaster-prone areas. Madam Speaker, next financial year, I have provided shillings to 20.7 billion plus a contingency fund of 169 billion to support disaster management. I have also provided 12.4 billion for improving meteorological services and early warning systems to improve efficiency and accuracy of weather forecasting for agriculture, air travel, and climate change tracking. Elimination of domestic areas. Madam Speaker, government has put in place a strategy to eliminate domestic areas in 3 financial years, starting financial year 25-26. Payment of domestic areas will prioritize suppliers of goods and services, contractors, and compensations for land and to war claimants. Madam Speaker, I have increased the allocation for domestic areas to shillings 1.4 trillion from 200 billion provided this financial year. To prevent accumulation of new areas, starting next financial year, my minister shall implement the following measures, and they are not easy measures. 1, enforcement of the commitment control sanctioning accounting officers responsible for creation of any arrears. 3, providing and ring-fencing adequate counterpart funding for multi-year projects. I am about to close. Financing the budget for the financial year. Resource envelope. Madam Speaker, the total resource envelope for financial 25-26 amounts to 72,481,481,502,103 shillings. This is detailed as follows. Domestic revenue amounting to shilling 37.55 trillion, of which 33.7 is from 33.94 trillion will be tax revenue, shillings 3.28 trillion non-tax revenue, and shillings 328.6 billion local government revenue. Domestic borrowing, shillings 11.38 trillion, domestic financing maturing domestic debt 10.30 trillion, grants and external borrowing for general budget financing is 2.08 trillion, external financing for projects is 11.33 trillion, of which 2.8 trillion are grants. Expenditure allocations. Madam Speaker, the following resources have been allocated as follows. Wages and salaries, 8.57 trillion. Non-wage recurrent expenditure, shillings 28.33 trillion, which also includes operational funds for institutions, financing for all wealth creation funds, financing for science and technology investment, grants for education and health, medicines, maintenance of infrastructure, and interest payments, among others. 3, development expenditure, 18.24 trillion. 4, domestic debt for refinancing, shillings 10.03 trillion. 5, debt amortization, 4.98 trillion. 6, domestic debt repayment to Bank of Uganda, 493 billion. 7, domestic arrears, 1.4 trillion. 8, local government expenditure from own revenue, shillings 328.6 billion. Madam Speaker, I have attached the details of the resource envelope and expenditure allocations by vote for financial year 25-26 as annexes 2 and 3. The financing strategy for financial year 25-26, Madam Speaker, below is the financing strategy for next financial year. 1, improving tax administration to raise an additional shillings 1.89 trillion. 2, introduction of new tax measures to increase domestic revenue by shillings 538.6 billion. 3, rationalizing tax exemptions to eliminate inefficient ones that do not support industrial policy. 4, repurposing resources in the budget for financial 24-25 from less productive to high-impact areas in line with the 10-fold growth strategy. 5, mobilizing more concessional financing from international financing institutions such as the World Bank, IMF, African Development Bank, Islamic Development Bank, Badeya ECT. 6, mobilizing development finance from other innovative sources, including public-private partnerships, climate finance, private equity, sukuk bonds, panda bonds, diaspora bonds, tax for financial year 25-26. Madam Speaker, an additional revenue of shillings 538.6 billion will be raised from new tax policy measures that were approved by Parliament. In addition to raising revenue, the measures will support the growth of businesses and the economy. The measures also include technical amendments to tax laws aimed at improving clarity and consistency, creating a fairer and a more predictable tax environment for businesses and taxpayers, and removing ambiguities that create loopholes leading to revenue leakage. These amendments are also intended to enhance tax administration, encourage voluntary compliance, and empower Uganda Revenue Authority to effectively enforce tax laws. Madam Speaker, I wish to present key highlights of the changes in tax laws. Income tax, exemption to start-up businesses. The NRM government has granted a 3-year income tax holiday for start-up businesses established by citizens after 1st July 2025. This is intended to support startups that struggle with the high initial investment costs. The incentive is to foster innovation, encourage formalization of SMEs, enhance business survival, and promote employment. Exemption from capital gains tax on transactions. Government has granted an exemption from capital gains tax on transactions where an individual transfers assets to a company they have established but also under their control. This is a deliberate policy intervention aimed at encouraging formalization of businesses. Madam Speaker, currently many Ugandans operate businesses under their personal names, often as sole proprietors or informal entities. When these individuals seek to transition into more formal and structured corporate entities for purposes of growth, access to finance, strengthening governance, or succession planning, they face a capital gains tax liability simply for transferring their assets into a company they fully own. This tax burden has been removed. Income tax exemption for Bujagali hydropower project. Madam Speaker, government has granted an income tax exemption to Bujagali Energy Limited for 1 year up to 30th June 2026 in accordance with our contractual obligations. This is intended to mitigate a rise in electricity tariffs. Stamp duty. Removal of stamp duty on mortgages and agreements. Madam Speaker, government has removed stamp duty on mortgages and agreements. This reform is intended to lower the cost of debt for businesses and individuals. It will also remove the financial burden imposed on businesses and individuals when they enter into agreements. Tax Procedure Code, waiver of interest and penalty for voluntary payment of outstanding principal tax. Government has extended the waiver period of any interest and penalties outstanding as at 30th June 24, provided that the taxpayer pays the principal tax by 30th June 2026. This waiver is intended to provide relief to businesses and individuals to enable them to settle outstanding tax liabilities and resume normal operations. Value-added tax, reform of the penalty regime for non-compliance with IFRIS. Madam Speaker, we have implemented the electronic fiscal receipting and invoicing system, IFRIS, to improve tax compliance and reduce tax evasion. However, concerns have been raised regarding the high penalties of shillings 6 million per invoice, regardless of the value of the transaction, which disproportionately burdened taxpayers. To address this issue, the penalty structure has been amended so that the penalty for non-compliance will instead be twice the tax owed by the taxpayer. I urge taxpayers to embrace the IFRIS system as it helps the taxpayer to reduce lengthy and burdensome transactions with URA staff, audits, and penalties. It also promotes transparency and creates an even playing field. Excise duty, Madam Speaker. We have increased the taxes on cigarettes to discourage consumption, but also generate additional revenue. Excise duty on soft cap cigarettes has been increased to shillings 65,000 per 1,000 sticks from 55,000, and hinge lead cigarettes to shillings 90,000 per 1,000 sticks from 80,000. For those outside East African community, excise duty on soft cap cigarettes has been increased to shillings 150,000 per 1,000 sticks from shillings 75,000, and hinge lead cigarettes for 200,000 per 1,000 sticks from shillings 100,000. Madam Speaker, government has removed the excise duty rate of 30% or shillings 950 per litre, whichever is higher, on beer manufactured from barley that is grown and malted in Uganda, because it was redundant. Also, government has adjusted the excise duty on beer manufactured with local raw materials content of at least 75% by weight of its constituents, including water, to 30% or shillings 900 per litre from 30%, or 650 per litre, whichever is higher. This is to ensure that a manufacturer pays the same amount of tax whether using a specific rate or an ad valorem rate. Taxes on external trade. Introduction of an import declaration fee on imported items. Madam Speaker, I have imposed a small fee of 1% of the customs value on taxable items under the common external tariff. This measure seeks to align Uganda's tax policy with those of other East African community partner states where similar fees have been imposed. For instance, Kenya applies a 2% CIF charge. Establishment of an export levy on wheat bran, cotton cake, and maize bran. Madam Speaker, government has imposed an export levy of US dollars 10 per metric ton of wheat bran, cotton cake, or maize bran to encourage local value addition, particularly in the production of animal feeds. Currently, these products are exported as raw materials in the region, where value is added and imported into Uganda as finished goods. Therefore, this measure will encourage value addition and create jobs for our children. Taxes and on textiles. Madam Speaker, the NRM government has listened to our traders dealing in imported taxes for value addition, as they requested the import duty on imported fabric has been reduced. Effective 1st July 2025, the duty will be $2 per kilogram or 35%, whichever is higher, down from $3 per kilogram or 35%, whichever is higher. In addition, the import duty on garments has been reduced to $2.5 per kilogram or 35%, whichever is higher, from $3.5 per kilogram or 35%, whichever is higher. Public debt. Madam Speaker, the stock of public debt is projected at US $31.5 billion, equivalent to shillings 116 trillion by the end of June 2025. Of this, external debt accounts for US $15.49 billion, equivalent to shillings 56.3 trillion, and domestic debt US $16 billion, equivalent to 59.77 trillion. As a ratio of GDP, our public debt is estimated at 51.26%, which is consistent with the Charter of Fiscal Responsibility. Madam Speaker, Uganda's debt is sustainable and is projected to remain so in the medium to the long term. The debt has financed investments that support private sector growth by providing requisite infrastructure. Over the last 10 years, the areas which public debt has financed, including integrated transport infrastructure, 29.3%, electricity infrastructure, including power generation plants and transmission lines, 27.6%, water for production and consumption, 11.5%, agro-industrialization, 5.1%, education and health, 5%, housing and urban development, 3%, and the development of industrial parks, 2%. To maintain public debt sustainability, government is implementing the following actions. 1, domestic revenue mobilization to increase revenue collection and reduce borrowing. 2, mobilization of more concessional financing from international financial institutions such as the World Bank, IMF, African Development Bank, Islamic Development Bank, BADEA, etc. 3, implementation of Okusaving initiative, where Ugandans will invest in government securities using mobile money. Now, I want to conclude. Madam Speaker, I know I have tired you. Madam Speaker, in conclusion, Uganda's economy has taken off. Can I repeat? Madam Speaker, in conclusion, Uganda's economy has taken off. When I did this thing, people started. We know what we are doing, man. The economic fundamentals, GDP growth, price stability, currency stability, jobs, export, FDI receipts are in good shape and highly competitive regionally and globally. The economic fundamentals, GDP growth, price stability, currency stability, jobs, export, FDI receipts are in good shape and are highly competitive regionally and globally. We have met the criteria for graduation from the category of low development countries. Poverty and inequality have just hold on. We have met the criteria for graduation from category of low LDCs. Poverty and inequality have reduced. Listen to this. Poverty and inequality have reduced significantly. Our deliberate onslaught on the subsistence economy has resulted in cutting the number of Ugandans working for only the stomach, kida kionka, to just 3 in every 10 homesteads. With our renewed commitment to fast-track a full monetization of the economy and redirect resources towards agro-industrialization, tourism, mineral beneficiation, manufacturing, innovations by our scientists, and digital transformation in Uganda is indeed unstoppable. Unstoppable. Mwandibadde mukuba mu ngalo nammwe. Temumpadde maanyi. This budget, therefore, is for all Ugandans who are ready to create wealth. Fellow countrymen and women, take full advantage of the innumerable opportunities contained in this budget. Innumerable opportunities in this budget. To those still in subsistence economy, the PDM and other wealth creation funds have been availed to support you to join the money economy in any of the 4 sectors: commercial agriculture, industry, services, or ICT. To the private sector, the 10-fold growth strategy presents many opportunities. Demand for household services and consumables is going to increase exponentially in the next 15 years on account of rising household incomes. The increase in GDP represents larger demand for intermediate goods and services among businesses. With a larger economy, government revenue will increase, and so will the size of government contracts to the private sector. To the investors and our partners in development, this budget guarantees peace, security, easy taxes, and a tolerable administration of justice. In Uganda, we protect private property, enforce contracts, and pay our debts. To the youth, this budget offers opportunities to acquire more skills, access finance, innovate and develop new and better products. The budget also contains huge investments in sports, particularly to upgrade the facilities in preparation for CHAN and AFCON 27. To those in the creative industry, the NRM government has fulfilled its promise to provide you with a revolving fund, acquire a home for you, and enact a copyright law to protect your intellectual property. This is just the beginning of what we intend to do to open doors for you to escape unemployment and manipulation by self-interested individuals and groups. Take full advantage of the opportunities to make money and live a productive life. Take full advantage of the opportunities to make